Time Atom by Alexei Novitzky. Introduction. The concept of multiple dimensions within reality may seem like science fiction. However, what is it that determines our reality in the first place? From the crystal of time, we see that spirit harmonics, or state, may be the deciding factor of which event line you fall into when orbiting the center of time. We see that habitable zones exist at places where our acceleration towards the center of time is equal to the speed of light. However, could we once again be missing a greater and greater picture? Is it not wheels within wheels as described by the ancient text? Do we really think that we are currently at our most advanced state of technological, mental, and spiritual development when compared to life in the past? Time Atom explores existence in a fascinating new way. Imagine you are a single atom in the much larger crystal of time. Our co-created conscious reality is constructed by passing universes back and forth to each other. A universe enters a habitable shell. We gather information, add to it, and then pass it off. But what if we could fall into another consciousness? What if our universe is the layering of a multiverse of some sort? What if we could alter our mind's standing harmonics to accept new universes that we normally would not? Would we not see, feel, and experience a completely new realm? For every action desired, there is the most appropriate physics. Here we will develop a new technique for body manifestation within an alternate dimension of space, time, and consciousness. We will say that our conscious manifestation is a direct result of conscious harmonics and spirit state. Conscious harmonics determine which universes are being captured. Spirit state would determine the location in time and how reality would unfold. The crystal of time shows that your spirit or orbital state alone may be the determining factor for your physical manifestation through a universe. The spirit state is your motion through time. Let me explain. In order for a human to perceive conscious reality, you would need to be accelerating at the speed of light towards the center of time. The rings depicted and used in the crystal of time consider a constant velocity around the center, which creates an acceleration towards center at light speed. But just like any object orbiting and falling, if your velocity decreases, your radius needs to decrease in order to stay in orbit. This is what creates the spiral of perception. This spiral represents the habitable locations for a universe with slowing time flow. This leads to the question, how many universes may occupy time at once? Is it possible to have particles flowing through time that are unobservable to our consciousness? What if we are the consciousness of a single time atom in a much larger crystal? In a way, are we not here in time saying reality circles us? Just like we once believed the sun circled the earth? Would we not get the same effect from having multiple universes orbiting and layering upon us? Let us take a step back and look at another picture. Time atoms. What we see from the crystal of time is that our known universe orbits the center of time. We see that our position in 3D spacetime is directly related to orbital distance and velocity. We see multiple universes with the same energy and velocity circling time. We see dark matter interfering with the flow of matter through time. We see events playing out differently as dark matter varies across time. We see drag from the time fluid causing the expansion of the universes as they orbit. We see our ability to perceive these universes relates to the acceleration towards center at light speed. We see the exiting of universes from time itself. The table of universes. It is possible that there are multiple universe types that exist in nature. Each one of these universe types varies based on its fundamental properties. They might have a certain spin, electric charge, size, viscosity, and etc. The ability for a universe to be perceived by consciousness is directly related to the acceptability of the universe to the time atom under review. With this in mind, it may be reasonable to create a table of universes. From this, we will be able to compare it with acceptable universe types with human consciousness. Types of time atoms. When considering the concept of time atoms, it makes sense that there would be several different types. Some would have more stable universe shells than others. The rotation rate of the time fluid might be faster, slower, or spin in the opposite direction. The total diameter may vary as well. So you could see the potential in creating a table of time atoms. What does that even mean? Each time atom would be its own set of consciousness that may perceive or accept similar universe types. For example, human, dog, and cat all have the ability to interact with our modern construct of reality. You could say we all have the ability to experience a common universe. Although our physical universal experience may overlap, they are not the same. Humans, dogs, and cats have different consciousnesses and bodies. Therefore, they are of different time atoms, experiencing the same universe. Perhaps they have a fewer number of stable orbital shells. Some beings, or rather time atoms, may have the ability to naturally interact with universe types that we cannot. This may be why animals, for an easy way of putting it, do weird things sometimes. In a way, you could also say that this phenomenon would translate directly into the type of mental construct the being has. Dimensions of perception. It is always important to go back in our time and look at our senses and our ability to perceive when attempting to explain the mysteries of reality. For example, let's consider the number of shells a time atom may contain, as well as the potential number of universes within each shell. Let us go back to the senseless being, as in a being that does not have any senses. It would most likely think that reality did not exist. It would probably not even know it was alive. It, at the very best, is simply existing in our reality. This being, or stone for all we know, would most likely only have one shell with one or two universes orbiting. It merely has the ability to exist. Its mental construct is one dimension, I. For this case, let's call this a TA1, time atom 1. Our next being on the list would have the ability to feel. It would have wall or no wall. Its mental construct would be that of two dimensions. It can either perceive away from the wall or towards the wall. This being may have two shells of universes orbiting it. Its mental construct or consciousness is more advanced than the previous case. I exist. There is a wall. Let's call this being a TA2. The universes inside would pack in or orbit in a way that preserves balance. It is also possible that the shells do not need to be completely filled. You can imagine beings that fall into the category of a TA2, similar to flowing matter, a magnet, or archaeobacteria. The next being on the list would have the ability to feel and to taste/smell. This would give it the impression of wall or no wall, and taste good or taste bad. You could say that this being has a greater sense of self-awareness for survival. It could be considered the first form of passion. It has purpose. I exist. I want that molecule. Perhaps this being has another shell in its time atom than the previous example. Let's call that a being with the ability to smell and taste, a TA3. As the beings become more conscious, you can see the number of available universe particles increases dramatically. A being in the TA3 category is one that has the ability to taste and smell. An example of a TA3 being would be an amoeba. There are easily 8 space holders for potential universes available. All of these previous examples still only give the being a conscious perspective or distance of 0. Sound or advanced feeling is the first sense that allows us to detect velocity and location. It is our ability of precognition. You could imagine a being with a consciousness like this to have more shells than the previous one. I exist, I want to go there for that molecule, but I need to time my approach. Let's call this being a TA4. A being of TA4 has the ability to hear sounds. This translates in the ability to construct a three-dimensional environment in which there is motion. Again, the number of universe particles increases dramatically as the circle or spherical shape grows in size. This example shows a being with 12 universe particles orbiting its center. An example of this would be a blind animal found in a cave. Now here on Earth, this is where things get a little tricky. Some animals, like us humans, develop the ability to detect electromagnetism centered around the color yellow. Some animals, like dolphins and bats, developed a sonar system. However, all those animals also have the ability to see with eyes. For our next grouping, we will only consider that have the ability to see and electromagnetism with eyes. Their mental construct is now, I exist, that looks good, I want to go there for that molecule. I need to time my approach. Again, the mental construct has grown in size. We could potentially add another shell to this time atom, Let's call this group a TA5. 1. Our next group falls within the lines of TA5. They have the ability to detect wall, to taste and smell, to hear, and to see. However, they also have a sixth sense of sort. These are the beings with sonar, like bats and dolphins. These beings would have construct of reality based off of a sight, like a TA5-1 group, but they also have an added layer of sensory information. Let's call this group a TA5-2. Again, we see a large jump in the number of universes that may be captured. Humans and dolphins are examples of a TA5 beings. The next group of being comes from our theoretical aliens in Your Influence in Space. This being has the ability to see and travel through time, just as easy as we see the stars at night. This being would have a similar gap in evolutionary advancement to us as we do to earthworms. With the ability to see and walk through wormholes, you could say this being has a greater sense of awareness. It would have one more shell in its mental construct. I exist. That looks like it was good at one point. Let's go back in time for that molecule. This being would have a TA6. What you see is that for every sense or dimensional construct, we have added a shell for universes to orbit in. All of the beings we just mentioned would be accepting of the same universe particles. Our next being is the first type that has the ability to accept a different universe type. This theoretical being would be one that could travel not only through time, but dimensions as well. I exist. That looks like it was good at one point. Let's see what it looks like in another dimension. It would have more universe shells than the previous type for our model. We will call this a TA7. It is important to note that there may also be beings of lower TA number that also accept multiple universe types. These would be considered special exemptions from our humanly understanding. Perhaps we could add a suffix based on the universe types accepted. For example, TA1 parentheses AB or TA3 parentheses AC. Conscious or time atom packing. All objects want to go towards equilibrium. An easy way to put it is earth goes to earth, water goes to water, air goes to air, and space need not bother. However, in the smaller sense, when it comes to crystals and atoms, they tend to pack as tightly together as possible in an effort to preserve energy. There are basic shapes that come from this packing of spheres. The five major shape types that exist are the tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, the icosahedron, and the dodecahedron. Obviously, there may be more shapes, but these are the main shapes that crystal formations naturally tend to favor. Let's now theorize on how these time atoms may pack based on the number of universes they may contain. Considering universes orbit the center of time similar to electrons, it may be reasonable to follow the current crystalline structures that exist in our periodic table of elements. Here are a few examples of what the packing of time atoms may look like in a crystalline formation. TA1 crystal. It is unknown at this time what the true packing of nature of TA1 may be. However, for a being with one shell, it may pack similar to hydrogen. TA2 crystal. Again, the true state of the time crystal packing is unknown. We use beryllium in this example to illustrate the packing of time atoms with two shells. TA3. The TA3 crystal would be one that has three shells of universes orbiting it. What you see is that the structures created by time atoms may vary greatly. This structure resembles the packing of silicon. TA5. There are many different crystals that exist in nature. Taking a note from our ancestors, perhaps this is the crystalline structure associated with human consciousness. There are two other main characteristics worth covering when it comes to crystal formations. One would be the concept of minerals, the other would be the concept of having universal bonds between atoms, similar to ionic, covalent, and metallic. What could those imply in our consciousness universe model? Bonds between atoms. In nature, there are a few bonds that allow for the sharing of electrons. In our model, this would imply the sharing of universes between time atoms. This translates into the ability to consciously interact with one another. The common types are ionic, covalent, and metallic. Ionic bonds. The graphic is an example of an ionic bond. One atom loses its an electron and gives it to the other. This creates both a negative and positive ion. The negative ion now has both electrons and the positive ion has lost one. At first glance, this doesn't seem like a model we would be interested looking further into. However, we will return to it. Covalent bonds. Covalent bonds form when the outer shell of the atom is sharing an electron with one or more atoms. For the sake of conscious generation by passing universes, this model may be the key. It also may lead us into answering some of the tougher yet unanswered questions of modern physics, such as what is quantum entanglement? Metallic bonds. Metallic bonds exist when the charge of the outermost shell of an atom is satisfied by a cloud of free-floating electrons. This model may or may not have practical uses when looking at the time atom. For now, let's let it be. Minerals of time atoms. A mineral, in the most generic sense, is a crystalline structure composed of two or more elements. The crystals in the above section represented pure crystals with no impurities. However, a quartz crystal is composed of silicon and oxygen. The combination of these individual elements or atoms makes a new structure with characteristics that are unique to the two original atoms. That is interesting on its own, but let's stay focused on solely that elements may embed themselves into the crystalline structure of another element. Pyrite is a good example of a mineral. It is composed of one iron atom and two sulfur atoms. It has characteristics of both ionic and covalent bonds. When translating this into our consciousness models, we see that the number of shared universes is an indicator of which types of beings may coexist on a conscious level. Let's take a look at pyrite mineral and compare this to the potential experience of starfish and protozoa. In the periodic table of elements, iron is shown to have 4 shells, 4 electrons to fall into it. Sulfur is shown to have 3. For this example, let's pretend iron is a Ta4 being and sulfur is like a Ta3 being. An example of a Ta4 being would be a starfish. An example of a Ta3 might be the protozoan or other single-celled being. Here you can see that a starfish and protozoa may pack together to form a conscious reality. They share information via sharing universes via ionic and covalent bonds. This is a very simple example showing a crystal of co-creation. The universes that are being shared are of similar type and create a stable charge. The cluster shares a center. Not all conscious crystals in time are in direct contact with each other. This creates clusters of co-conscious creation. A simple example may be a family. Imagine a father, a mother, a son, a daughter, and maybe a cat or dog. They may have their own conscious reality that is then exchanged via metallic bondings of sorts with other conscious crystals. This would translate directly into the types of cliques or gangs that exist in the human population. We are all humans that live on Earth, and so you would assume we have the same goals and general constructs of reality. However, in practice, they are much different. They are almost like their own co-created consciousness, or grains of time. You can see that with this simple representation how the two individual grains may experience different viewpoints on cultural issues. There have not been enough exchange of universes for them to be properly tuned to each other. The more time between sharing universes, the more different the cultures of co-conscious creation become. However, once direct covalent bonds have been made, it is likely that individual experiences, viewpoints, or rather expectations will merge. An altered state of consciousness. What does an altered state of consciousness do to a time atom? Brain harmonics relate directly to frequency, and it's not too far-fetched to reason that a change in your brain harmonics will cause a change in which universe particles you'll be capturing or interpreting into your consciousness. There are many types of altered states of consciousness, which may be induced in several ways. Hypnosis is a commonly used method to create a sort of super focus within the person being hypnotized. Past events may be replayed and seen in different perspectives. True healing may come from this. This type of altered consciousness does not seem to allow for new universes to enter. It does, however, seem to allow the user to float more freely through the fluid of time. Another altered state of consciousness that we all experience at night would be sleep. Here we see the increase of the hormone melatonin into the bloodstream. Sleep is extremely interesting when considering interdimensional travel. Remember, universe type accepted is related to brain or conscious harmonics. When you are sleeping, your brain goes through a variety of changes. Each one of these changes gives the sleeper a new conscious experience. One brainwave pattern that may be of interest is the delta wave pattern. The long wave format appears to be several times that of the alpha wave. Theoretically, based on wave addition and subtraction, the delta wave pattern may be collecting information from another universe particle. The use of hallucinogens is also commonly known to alter someone's state of consciousness. Some common states are MDMA, LSD, and DMT. All of these hallucinogens cause one's brain chemistry and harmonics to change dramatically. It is said that DMT may be the direct key to unlock the conscious path to higher dimensions. It is the molecule produced in the pineal gland and released at the moment of death. People that have experienced near-death experiences account similar stories. There are many accounts of people communicating with lost or living family members, witnessing events unfolding, and of course, the tunnel of white light. There are also accounts of speaking with angels and potentially extraterrestrials from another dimension. Are these beings real? Where, how, and what could be happening? A shift in standing energy. Standing brainwave frequency is a direct result of wave function. In a normal waking environment, you are conscious of our normal waking world. Our brain waves are in a beta state, which is a vibratory frequency of 13 to 30 hertz. Based off the model, you would be experiencing normal waking universes. Just before sleep, humans are in an alpha state, which is 8 to 13 hertz. When you fall into the delta wave function, your wavelengths become almost 7 times longer. Relating this solely to frequency, you could say that the universes captured would need to be 7 times in wavelength or size as well. Let's call that the deltaverse. It is the conscious creation of brain harmony tuned to delta waves. This could be related to the molecule melatonin. While experiencing DMT, there's an increase of slow and fast gamma waves. Slow gamma waves range from 30 Hz to 50 Hz, and fast gamma waves range from 50 to 100 Hz. Here again, you see space for another universe type to be perceived. Let's now think logically about wave tuning. You could see that for every common factor or multiple of human consciousness, a different universe type may be accepted. A different universe type may exist. We may say that alpha is 10 Hz. Then it is only logical that experiences would be captured at multiples of that vibration. Let's just see how this works and then see what we may infer from that. Very quickly, a hertz is how many times a wave occurs in a second. So alpha is 10 Hz, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 puts us into the theta waves, which are associated with sleep. Divide that by 2, and you are at 2.5. That puts us in the deltaverse, similar to a deep sleep. Now let's go the other way. 10 Hz times 2 is 20 Hz. The 20 Hz frequency relates to the beta waves, or beta verse. This is our normal waking state. You could say that we all mostly live in the beta verse. Again, let's multiply that by 2, and that gets us to 40 Hz. We are now in the slow gamma verse. Multiply that by 2, and we are at 80 Hz. This wave function is associated with extremely heightened perception. We are now in the fast gamma verse, similar to a DMT experience. This is the state of mind when out-of-body experiences occur. That would be the end of normal human brainwave function. However, what universes would we be in if we doubled our conscious harmonic one more time? 80 Hz times 2 goes to 160 Hz. Is there a universe to be experienced at every harmonic resonance? I would argue that at each interval an experience may be had and that we may use tools in order to perceive these higher dimensions of consciousness. This would relate to 160 Hz, 320 Hz, 640 Hz, 1280 Hz, 2560 Hz, and so on. Understanding this, we may now fill our table of universes more accurately. However, before we do that, let's compare the delta wavelength to the longest wave perceivable as determined by the liquid light state universe. An interesting piece of evidence. In the liquid light state universe, we calculated the size of the conscious snapshot by saying that we take a picture with our brain 60 times a second. We then multiplied this by the speed of light to determine a theoretical diameter for our consciousness. It ended up being 3 times 10 to the 8 times 60 times a second, and we got 5 million meters as our radius. We then multiplied that by 2 to get the diameter of a sphere. From this, we theorized on the longest wavelength that we could manipulate with conscious preparations. This number ended up being 1 times 10 to the 7 meters. This would relate directly to the longest wavelength human consciousness could perceive or manipulate based off light state theory alone. From the crystal of time, we see that habitable zones are places where acceleration is equal to the speed of light. However, let's turn that around. Another way to perceive a universe is if it is circling us at a rate and distance that would cause it to accelerate towards the center at light speed. Let us now calculate the diameter associated with acceleration at light speed of the delta wave. The longest delta wave occurs roughly at 1.2 hertz. We know that our frequency of rotation then is 1.2 hertz. We know that acceleration towards center must be equal to the speed of light. From this, we are able to calculate a theoretical radius where our delta wave may manifest or universes orbit. This would make our diameter 1 times 10 to the 7 meters. Deltaverse may exist in a cloud that orbits our center of time at a radius of 5 times 10 to the 6 meters. In an astronomical sense, this is extremely significant. Take a moment to understand this. All of our consciousness associated with the delta wave type may be in a cloud surrounding our golden spot at a radius of 5 times 10 to the 6 meters. Let's add the average cloud diameter to the table of universes as well, inducing higher frequencies. There may be ways in which we may theoretically induce higher brainwave function. Several tools currently exist on the market that help people focus their mind. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, is one of the most commonly used devices at the moment. Professional video gamers and drone pilots use them to get an advantage. However, they are all being used to work in the betaverse. It may be possible to use a similar device and induce smooth brain harmonics at the 160 Hz range. It would require someone who is well versed in mental focus and meditation. It would be very interesting to see what would happen at each of these harmonic intervals: 160, 320, 640, 1280, and 2560 Hz. A more defined time atom model. Based on what we have seen from brainwave function, we may now make a guess on the frequency involved with the orbital states. We could say that the slowest orbital may be related to the delta waves and the highest naturally may be related to the gamma waves. Therefore, the orbital frequency of the exterior shell would be near 2.5 Hz. The orbital frequency of the second would be 5, and so on. Earlier, we depicted the size of the shell based on the number of senses. That was a good start. However, it may be more appropriate to consider brain or conscious harmonics, which is now more properly shown. Here you can see theoretical frequencies associated with each shell type. Let's now add 2 more shells of brain capability to get to our TA7 being. Back to the magic sphere. In the liquid light state universe, we introduced the concept of the magic sphere. Let us now relate this to brain function in higher order consciousness. Consider this a mind and spirit antenna. The magic sphere with no interior rings would make a single center peak. This center peak represents the standing wave harmonic of any system in the light state. Here we are talking about the human brain. You can see that one hump relates to the delta wave. By adding the second set of rings in perfect harmony, we are able to have 2 peaks. This pattern may continue to repeat as long as the vibrations remain in harmony. Here you can see the vibrations have added twice more. We are now to the slow gamma ability. By continuing to maintain perfect harmony within the brain, it is possible to increase this antenna to reach even higher and higher states of consciousness. Our next examples show a being that has the ability to perform brain waves at 160 Hz and 320 Hz. You can see the potential in calming of the mind and while stimulating through TMS to create these wave patterns. It would be very interesting to see what conscious reality a being would perceive with these wave functions occurring in mind. However, another important consideration is that with properly timed waves, it does not take that much energy to build upon itself. A trained practitioner of meditation may easily be able to increase their brain function to the DMT state and beyond. Use of molecules and drugs during training will only allow for so much advancement. In order to reach sustained higher levels of consciousness, it must be done without additives. Clouds of universes. From this model, you can see that your entire construct of consciousness is being formed by orbiting clouds of universes that accelerate towards your conscious center. The harmonic state of your brain determines which universes you are tuned to and what you will ultimately experience. Cloud technologies. Based on the concept of various universe clouds orbiting our center of consciousness, there may be a way to manipulate the incoming light state to have them naturally fall within our perception. In a way, this seems more logical than using technology to increase our brainwave function. It is probably healthier as well. You wouldn't have to maintain the 80 Hz or 160 Hz wave harmonic. Instead, you could experience the higher dimension in your normal waking state. Light state technology gives us clues on how to manipulate the natural nodes of manifestation within our physical universe. Using these techniques, we could essentially warp the local sphere to have the higher dimensions fall within our natural radius, or betaverse. The easiest universe to attempt to shift first would be the fast gammaverse. This is the wave associated with near-death experiences and DMT journeys. Let's logically think about this for a minute. In the light state model, the fast gammaverse is a cloud of universes that orbits at an average distance of 2,500 meters from your conscious center. Our betaverse orbits at approximately 40,000 meters away from your conscious center. This is a factor of 16 times. We'd want to expand the cloud of fast gammaverse particles from 2,500 meters to encompass the 40,000 meter sphere. While doing this, the process would naturally push away any interfering betaverse particles. They would essentially be shifted out of waking consciousness and somewhere in the dreamland. Gravity, magnets, lenses, and dense structures all have an influence on the incoming light state. In this case, we would want to create an expanded light state. This would be one that slows incoming electromagnetism from all directions, or rather puffs out space. You would need a sort of negative gravity field that could create a time dilation equal to 16 times normal motion. At the same time, you would want to make sure that the particles are still accelerating towards you at the speed of light. When you expand the light state, it does not slow down the rates of rotation. At this point, you would have a sphere of fast gammaverse particles with an orbital frequency of 80 Hz. You would also need to slow down the speed to match that of the betaverse, which would be 20 Hz. The rotation rate would need to be slowed by 4 times. In short, in order for the fast gammaverse to be experienced in normal waking reality, you would need to expand the light state by 16 times and create a counter rotation of 4 times. It may be possible that it is first easier to expand the state, then rotate it, or possibly do them both at the same time. Just an important side note, you would want to make sure that the physical space you encompass is not being warped. Just the spherical volume starting at the distance of where it would want to naturally be. To explain a little more, you'd want the counter torsion field generator to start at about 2,400 meters away and extend to 40,000 meters away. That would most likely create an environment in which you could experience the fast gammaverse in your normal betaverse state of mind. This would allow you to physically walk around and experience this alternate dimension. Relativity is relativity. Everything is relative. Currently we use an average of 2.5 Hertz as our cycle of time for the delta wave. This is completely related to the number of cycles per second. The concept of a second is a very human thing. For us, the relative ratios of mind go from 2.5 Hertz in our delta wave state to 80 Hertz in our fast gamma state. You could imagine that our 2.5 Hertz could be similar to the 80 Hertz of another species within time. Meaning, instead of their range going from 2.5 Hertz to 80 Hertz, it may go from 80 Hertz to the number of harmonics away from that. Let me show you. Here we will multiply our sets by 2 and see how they relate. 2.5, 5, 10, 20, 40, and 80 for humans would correlate to 80, 160, 320, 640, 1280, and 2560 Hertz for a being that is in a completely shifted dimension. Similarly to how we call our current frequency range of universes the universe, we could call this secondary frequency ranges the noviverse. In other words, the DMT high gamma state for humans could be the delta state of a being that has access to different dimensions or universe particles. The time dilation associated would be directly related to the Lorentz contraction. The diameter of a 2.5 Hertz wave is 2.4 times 10 to the 6 meters. The diameter of the 80 Hertz wave is 2,500 meters. Here you can see the amount of Lorentz contraction this equates to, and then infer a time dilation between the two dimensions of waking life. Basically, the ratio is 2 times 10 to the 6 divided by 2,500, which goes to about 1,000. That is our multiplying factor. Theoretically, you could say, as far as waking perception, that for every 1 second that passes here in the betaverse, 1,000 seconds would pass in the betaverse equivalent of noviverse. 640 Hertz, or stellaverse, would be their beta state. So a diameter of 40,000 meters divided by 40 goes to roughly 1,000. The 4 rotations a second would also add to the time dilation. It may be a safer assumption to say that the total time dilation would be 4,000 to 1. This goes to 1 second being equivalent to 1 hour and 1 minute. The same could be true for a harmonic lower frequency. There could be a set of harmonics that exist there as well. Our 2.5 Hertz of the delta state would be equivalent to the 2.5 fast gamma. This being said, it is almost like our highest levels of brain function matches the lowest of the next ring. Theoretically, someone on the DMT state of mind may be able to connect consciously with an ET or angel that is sleeping. The layering of conscious types within time. Here you can now see the potential for the layering of conscious types or universes within the crystal of time. The physical manifestations could all be existing simultaneously, but in longer wave form and time dilated. The 1 second of time experienced by a Betaverse mind would be related to 1 hour of time in the normal waking world of Noviverse. Likewise, 1 hour of time in the dimension would be equivalent to 1 second of time in the dimension shifted to longer waves. Have we just uncovered wheels within wheels? What is it that determines our experience? If a 1 second experience in our universe translates into 1 hour in the Noviverse, then the difference between the lower verse and the Noviverse would be even greater. The ratio would be 4,000 to 1 times 4,000 to 1, which is 4,000 squared. This would make a time dilation between the two habitable phases equal to 16 million, meaning for every second that passes on the lower verse, roughly 16 million seconds would happen in the Noviverse. That's equivalent to 44,444.4444444 repeating, which is also equivalent to 185.185.185.185 repeating. It is interesting to compare the cycles here on Earth, which is most commonly related to half a year. The next cycle after that would be related to 4,000 cubed. And that equals 64 billion seconds, which roughly translates into 2,029 years. You can see by the nature of the crystal of time that the cycle will continue onward indefinitely. Interdimensional telescope. By understanding the light state, brain harmonics, and the conscious connection, we may theoretically design an interdimensional telescope that may look into these hidden dimensions. This telescope would function on the premises of the cloud technologies mentioned earlier. However, for this interdimensional telescope concept, you would only be creating a window in which you could look into these alternate dimensions. Potentially, you may be able to physically walk into it, but we would have to build one to see. Again, we would be using light state theory to create the desired shifting and stretching of nodes to create this effect. You would start at 0.0 in meters and need to create a field that extends from about 2,400 meters to 40,000 meters away. This would be 1.5 miles to 24.85 miles. In other words, the field generated would need to be 25 miles long. Within this tunnel, you would want to uniformly expand and stretch the light so that the space that would normally fall from 1.5 miles moves to 24.85 miles away. At the same time, you would need to create a torsion or rotating field at 4 cycles a second to ensure that the particles would be accelerating towards the center of time at the speed of light. The torsion force would run perpendicular to the stretching force. With these motions in effect, you would be able to use an everyday camera or telescope and look into another dimension. Walking down this tunnel would be an extremely weird feeling, as the walls would be rotating at 4 Hertz and the space would be stretching in front of you. However, it is theoretically possible. The stretching of the light within the tunnel could also be done via the use of electromagnetic coils. Light follows the right-hand rule, and so you could potentially make a 25-mile-long tunnel surrounded by extremely powerful electromagnets. These electromagnets would essentially be slowing light down that enters the tunnel. At the same time, they would want to be creating a rotation motion needed as well. It really comes down to having a nuclear power source for the device. The length of the field and torsion required is directly related to the number of harmonic shifts desired. This machine could be made to look into higher than Noviverse dimensions and lower than lower verse. For the lower verse direction, the light would be crunched and spun the opposite direction. An interesting benefit to this model is that you wouldn't have to have the machine running at all times. You could simply take photos one at a time. This would save dramatically on power requirements. Natural portals to other dimensions. Knowing the proper conditions in order to experience an alternate dimension is the first step. Now that we do, we may theorize on locations on Earth and in our solar system where these interdimensional portals may naturally exist. The Earth has an extremely powerful magnetic field. During solar storms, the magnetic field reacts with incoming solar radiation. This causes the aurora borealis effect, which can be seen much across the globe. Certain points on the Earth act as focal lengths for this magnetic energy. The Earth spins, passes through electric space, and is bombarded by solar radiation. All of these events and many more cause these focal points to act as a sort of interdimensional telescope as described earlier. They potentially could cause the torsion and stretching of space required to open temporary windows into these realms. The transition may not be as smooth and steady as using the interdimensional telescope as described earlier. However, you could still capture much information and potentially reside in one of these places for some time. Theoretically, a portal to another dimension could open up naturally and maintain stability for an indefinite amount of time. Maximizing nature's flow. Here on Earth, we use rivers, wind, and other naturally flowing elements to generate electricity. Is it possible that we could harness the energy of the magnetic vortex? One thing to notice is that there seem to be ancient structures associated with many of these magnetic points just described. It is possible that the ancients were either generating electricity or focusing the magnetic energy in such ways to maximize these, in quotes, interdimensional telescopes. Flowing water, pyramids, and other dense shapes all influence the natural light state. The easiest way to see the effect of a pyramid would be to look at a prism. Prisms typically bend white visible light to create a visible rainbow. The bending of light is directly related to the thickness of the structure. You could easily imagine pyramids to be a radio or magnetic prism of sorts. The tunnel of light. One common description of both near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and even DMT trips would be the tunnel of white light. Let's relate this to what an interdimensional telescope would look like. As the local light state or space stretched away, a tunnel of light would form around the circumference. This would be the apparent crunching of the betaverse, which would create a sort of black hole, with the event horizon glowing white as all the patterns of the betaverse would crunch together. White light is the combination of all colors. The tunnel would also be rotating at approximately 4 times a second. Is there a relationship? Is this another piece of evidence in the connection between dimensions? Spirit determines the 3D experience. From the crystal of time, we see that our spirit or orbital state determines where in the universe we manifest. When it comes to normal universe particles occurring in the betaverse, we need to be at a place where our acceleration is equal to the speed of light. That would allow for human consciousness to properly interact with the preparing and crunching of space. Although beings may inhabit each other's universe, or rather share universes, it does not necessarily mean they will be able to manifest into a 3D being. They may be in a location in the time atom where they are pure mind and spirit. Let's theoretically evaluate what would be needed in order to manifest into and physically interact with another conscious reality. The main ingredient is being in an orbit around time that is equal to the acceleration at light speed. Spirit or current light state harmony at the moment of conscious shifts determines the starting point of that experience. Let's look at normal everyday dreaming and how this relates. In the simplest terms, if you go to bed thinking about how awful the day was and how badly people treated you, then you will most likely have bad dreams. If you go to sleep thinking about how amazing people in your life are and how you are filled with love, then you will most likely have happy dreams. The same is true for all shifts in consciousness. This is directly related to the comfort of your light state harmony or spirit. Your body wants to be in its golden spot, as described by the liquid light state universe. All the assumptions, expectations, wants and don't wants build up an unhealthy stress and strain relationship within the light state. If maintained, you literally start to become sick. By relaxing and harmonizing with the light state, you will become healthier and happier. Let's now relate this to the last conscious experience we have any insight, which would be the near-death experience. There are 2 main descriptors of this high gammaverse. One is that of internal bliss and love. The other is of regret and sorrow. If this truly is the gateway into the next life, then it is as if we will manifest next into an event line that will harmonize with our spirit or current light state harmony. Perhaps this is what we would call karma in modern times. Ionic bond related to life and death. Let us now go full circle and look at our normal waking experience for more clues onto the nature of reality. What is it to be born? What is it when we pass? Ionic bonds may give us insight into the nature and start of conscious experience and the conscious shift or evolution of a species. Energy is not created or destroyed, but it may be transferred between dimensions. In the ionic bond drawing, you see that the top 2 atoms both have a positive and negative charge. After the bond is formed, one atom has no electron and the other has 2. The 2 atoms find equilibrium by resting next to one another. Motion of atoms within the time crystal would relate directly to dimensional shifts, as they would offset the universe being captured by the light speed acceleration towards center. Basically, for every location in the time crystal, there is a different pattern or sphere of universes orbiting. It could be similar to the universe state of time, similar to how we have a light state in our universe. The ionic bond would be representative of either a species becoming more evolved or potentially the essence of two souls becoming one. Just a backyard observer. With our human body and senses, will we ever truly be able to understand what it is to be conscious? Will we ever truly understand reality? It may seem counterintuitive, but as long as we continue to place so much value on technology, we will never develop higher natural senses, such as the TA6 and TA7 beings. From this model, we see that true progress comes when we understand the process of spirit, or light state harmony, and conscious shifts. Thanks for reading, and I hope you have a wonderful trip through reality.